offering patients the most sophisticated medical advancements while keeping the ease and familiarity of a community hospital. Support for Chautauqua Sunrise has been provided by WRFA 107.9 FM, Jamestown's public radio station, streaming online 24/7 at WRFALP.com. Low power to the people. Chautauqua Sunrise is made possible by a grant from Fredonia Place, a continuing care retirement community providing dignity in a modern luxury environment. Meter's Restaurant, a family tradition for over 50 years in downtown Ripley, is a proud supporter of Chautauqua Sunrise. Meter's provides all-day dining, banquet services, and custom catering, specializing in pie. Funding for Chautauqua Sunrise is provided in part by the Chautauqua County Industrial Development Agency, with offices in Jamestown and Dunkirk, helping businesses to prosper throughout Chautauqua County. From supporting people with disabilities to enjoy great lives, to providing health care services that are available to anyone, the Resource Center has been improving our county for more than 60 years. Learn more about how the Resource Center makes a positive difference in people's lives. From the Access Chautauqua Studios in Mayville, it's Chautauqua Sunrise. Chautauqua Sunrise is hosted by Doc Hamels and supported by the award-winning volunteers at Access Chautauqua. We are here to share local news, colorful interviews, and events of interest to everyone. Chautauqua Sunrise is broadcast live Saturday mornings each week from 9 to 10 a.m. Send events via email or call us live. Check us out on YouTube and Facebook. And now, from the Access Chautauqua Studios, it's Chautauqua Sunrise.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Doc Hamels, and welcome to another edition of Chautauqua Sunrise. We're happy you could join us, and let's go. Good morning for those of you watching me live. Good afternoon for those of you watching me live somewhere around the world. And good afternoon for those of you that are listening to me on WRFA 107.9, low power to the people in Jamestown, Tuesdays at 1 o'clock. Thanks for joining. And if you're watching this any other time of the day, at 2 and 8 throughout the week, thanks for watching as well. As always, I think, anyways, my personal opinion, we've got another great show in store for you. If you have been like me, that's been kind of hooked on the whole Curse of Oak Island kind of craze or addiction, whatever you want to call it, we got a great show for you because I have Oak Island researcher, author, theorist, guru, whatever you want to call him. He's waiting in the wings. He's been here before, but I'll introduce him in a little bit. So this may be one of those where you want to keep a copy of the YouTube link because you want to watch it over and over again because he's got a lot of good stuff to share, and we'll talk about that. Hey, this is a live show right now, and if you do want to call in and talk to my guest, myself, and make an announcement, you know the shtick here. Give us a call at 716-753-5225. So 716-753-5225. Or if you have an announcement, I get them every week, send it to chautauquasunrise@gmail.com. Okay, and we'll try to get your announcement on the air the following Saturday morning. Pretty easy. Call us, and we'll let you announce it live if you want, or Randy will take the information and hand it in. And a lot of times you can't tell, but you see my hand, watch how it disappears. This is when I go something like this, and Justin hands me a slip of paper. It's like TV magic. It just appears. You enjoying this weather? Holy mackerel. There's a grunt over here. We got about a foot of snow on the hill in Ripley. I was duly surprised. I couldn't believe that we went from grass to all that snow, and Brody just looked at me like it's probably up to his eyeballs because he's not that tall, and he's just like, Really? Get out there. I guess it's supposed to warm up here and melt off pretty quick, so we'll see. I don't know. But spring is on its way. The daffodils at my house are up about 6 inches, 7 inches. I was surprised I don't see any buds yet, but the little leaves and stalks are up good. Some of the buds are popping. I think I mentioned last week the pussy willows are starting to form, and that's just about right for the middle of March. Okay, I get this wrong every single year. Twice a year I get this wrong. So Jeff, if you're listening, he's on the other side of the wall. He'll keep me correct. Tonight, after we go to bed in the morning, we got to set our clocks forward. So we're losing an hour. Whew. After all these years, I got it right. Usually I say it backwards. So make the adjustments. So if you're going to church, you have an appointment, you're getting together with somebody, you're got to make sure you get that clock right. Fortunately, our phones and most of the things at home, it rolls over by itself. But so somebody call in, will you, and let me know, is this it? Are we going to stop doing this crazy forward and backward business? I think I heard something that they were going to do away with it this year, but they said that, I don't know, last 10, 12 years anyways. All right. Let's get to some announcements, because I do want to spend as much time with my guest as possible, because he's got a lot of fascinating things to share with you. All right. Still have my morning voice. Rotary raffle tonight. The Rotary Club of Westfield Mayville. Their Go for the Green virtual gold rush. I will be emceeing that on Facebook tonight. And if you bought a ticket, you can watch us live at 7:30, or you can watch us on Zoom, same time. And the information on the Zoom was on your ticket. If you don't have a ticket and you want to watch, just go to our Westfield Mayville Rotary Club Facebook page and click the whatever pops up. I don't know what you call it, frame. We're going to be giving away, from what I'm told, 45 different prizes. There were 240 tickets sold, so you've got a really, really good chance to win something tonight. We've had donations from all over the area that have provided gift certificates, which is really cool. Some of the grand prizes are going to be $1,000. The South Ripley Solar Project, once again, donated $1,000, and I will be announcing that tonight. I've done this, 10, 12 years now. I've emceed this event, and every year someone walks away with $1,000. So it could be you. People say, well, where's the money go? The money goes to scholarships for the Brockton, Sherman, Chautauqua Lake, and Westfield schools, and that includes Ripley, because Ripley sends their kids to Chautauqua Lake. Also, if any money's left over, they help with various community service projects that we help sponsor throughout the year. I think I can do this really fast. I have a list of people that donated, and I'll get my mouth moving really fast, so let's see if we can try to get everybody in there. Here we go. South Ripley Solar Project, Ed Lumber, Bella's Salon and Day Spa, Clarko's Restaurant, Charlie's Auto Center, Chris Knopp's Repair, CJ Pizza, Cornerstone Cafe and Bakery, Corsica Wine and Cheese, Picnic Basket by Dan Smith, and Elizabeth Link. They donated. Full Strength Coffee, Goldbrook Farm B&B, Grayson Abe's Grape Discovery Center, Helen Barron donated something, Jack's Barcelona Drive-In, Johnson Estate Winery, Katie Riley donated something, Lakeshore Savings, Lighthouse Point Grocery Meters Restaurant, Miss Laura's Flower and Cake Shop, Global Winery, Patty Benton and Steve Stratton donated something, Pete and Caroline Bills donated something, Pizza Guru, Quagley Hills Bar Grill, Stewart's in Mayville, Stewart's Mayville Hardware just down the road. Tastefully Simple, The Cooler, The Park View Restaurant, Tom and Ginny's Brickhouse donated something. Tops Friendly Market, Tracy Bennett, a CPA, donated something, and Westfield Ag and Turf. And I believe there might be a few more prizes as well. Some of those prizes will be assigned because they're going to be drawing earlier today. And then we're going to do, I believe it's the top 10 finalists at starting around 7:30 live. All right, and there's going to be a couple other little things that are going to go on in tonight's program. So get your popcorn, get your pizza and wings, whatever. Have a Gold Rush party, and we're going to be having some fun with you on Facebook. Speaking of businesses, Mayville ignites collaboration efforts. A Mayville business has found a passion for collaborating with other businesses and is excited to be working with others in the area. Mayville native Serena Gilkinson, the owner of Handcrafted from the Heart, over right just down the street from here, 38 South Erie Street in Mayville, has recently begun collaborating with other businesses on events and products. We are all in this together, so we might as well make it fun, says Gilkinson. And by doing these types of things, everyone wins. From the businesses getting more exposure and extra traffic to our community seeing the same result. The idea came to her as a way to not only build these business relationships and work together, but to help push additional foot traffic into the area businesses. Gilkinson's efforts began with an idea she had to partner with local restaurant, bakery to decorate sugar cookies. With a local restaurant and bakery to decorate sugar cookies with the community came as a light bulb went off. She partnered with Music for Your Mouth in December to offer a cookie decorating day for Christmas cookies, and since then the pair have been hosting them monthly. Their last winter-themed event will be taking place today, March 11th, from 2 to 3:30 at the Music for Your Mouth. If you're interested in knowing more about what she's doing, you can give her a call at 269-4129. All right, let's go to events for the weekend. This came in from PJ Wendell's office. This weekend, the Spring Fest at the Peak and Peak Restaurant and Resort over in Clymer, New York. Get ready for spring with a weekend of fun. Festivities are kicking off, they were last night at the retreat with live music. And then today they have events running from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. with a cardboard box derby. That sounds like fun. Going down the hill in a cardboard box. A retreat deck party, a pond skim. Don't ask me, I don't know what that means. And live music. Then on Sunday from noon to 4, there'll be a Hair of the Dog party, Bloody Mary and Mimosa Bar, and food and drinks. For more information, give them a call at 355-4141. Sounds like fun. Today, March 11th, the Crucible will capture live. Hang on a second now. The Crucible captured live via satellite from London National Theatre at 1 p.m. at the 1891 Fredonia Opera House Performing Arts Center. We're on Church Street in Fredonia. A witch hunt is beginning. Raised to be seen but not heard, a group of young women in Salem suddenly find their words have an almighty power. As a climate of fear, vendetta, and accusation spreads through the community, no one is safe from trial. Sounds like a book. Trial for $15. Tickets are $15 for the general public and $10 for students. And if you're interested, it's at 1 p.m. today. And if you want tickets, 679-1891. Moving ahead. Slide 16, Movies at the Reg, Jesus Christ Superstar. That's going to be held this Wednesday, March 15th, 7 p.m. and at 8:48 p.m. The dazzling interpretation of the hit by Tim Rice, Andrew Lloyd Webber rock opera tells the story of Christ, played by Ted Neely. Final weeks in a bold and epic production, shot entirely on location in Israel. Producer-director Norman Jewison creates a brilliant example of modern movie making with groundbreaking vision and the unforgettable songs of Rice and Weber. It's rated 100 G. It's 108 minutes long. Tickets you can get by calling 484-7070, or you can go to the box office throughout the week right there in Jamestown on 3rd Street. Also, let's go to the next slide. Improv or Hip-Prov at the Reg Lene. Colin Mokri and Assad Masai, I don't know if I'm killing their names, but I apologize, bring hit live show Hip-Prov, or it's Improv Under Hypnosis, to Jamestown straight from a 70 show off Broadway run. This is hard to read. In New York City, Hip-Prov, under hypnosis, is embarking on a North American tour with a stop in Jamestown at the Reginald Center for the Arts, March 18th at 7:30 p.m. An international success story, Hip-Prov has performed 200 plus shows and has been seen by a staggering, ready for this, Justin, 100,000 people throughout North America and Europe. The live show, which has been called a celebration of the human imagination by the Times of London, combines hypnosis and improv for a one-of-a-kind comedy experience. If I'm not mistaken, this was scheduled and had to be rescheduled, so I believe this is the reschedule. Okay, it's a 90-minute show, combines hypnosis and improv. In the two art forms together have mystified and entertained fans, skeptics, and everyone in between worldwide for a totally unique comedy experience. The evening begins with Messiah welcoming 20 volunteers on stage to be hypnotized. Not me. The most receptive to hypnosis then join Mockery to improvise the rest of the show while hypnotized. In the hands of the two experts and solely crafted from the volunteers' uninhibited, unconscious minds, each show is an entirely original and completely unforgettable theatrical experience. Whew. All right, the show is Saturday, March 18th at 7:30. Doors open at 6:30. Tickets, of course, are available online at regilena.com. And you also give them a call at the box office. Once again, where'd it go? I'll find it. Give me a second. 484-7070. Or also for more information, you can go to their website, regilena.com. Okay? Or go to the box office. Finally, Blingo. It's a fundraiser to benefit people with disabilities. It's set for March 30th, coming up at the end of the month. Those looking to enjoy a fun night out while supporting people with disabilities should plan to attend the 7th annual Sassy Bags and Beyond Blingo fundraiser, March 30th. It's a Thursday night. The event will be held at the Resource Center Administrative Offices at 200 Dunham Avenue in Celeron. Doors will open at 6 p.m. with the Blingo game starting at 7. Those planning to attend should park on the rear lot and use the entrance at the top of the ramp. All right, for more information, give them a call, 661-1477, and we'll announce more of this as we get closer this month. All right, we're going to take a breather. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. My guest is on his way in.
On the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self, and I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
Mysteries. Well, brought to you by Rabbit Hole Investigations. Well, folks, I'm happy to tell you that those two guys are in the studio right now, and one is the guy that's talking right now, and the other is my guest, James McQuiston.
How you doing?
I'm all right. If I can get my tongue untied from some of those announcements, they're tongue twisters some mornings. Jim, every time you've been on the show, you'll say to me, well, this is the last book I'm going to write.
Yep.
And then we have another book. You and I have known each other now 4 books.
4 books. That's how we count.
That's how we count. We know each other. And that's been a few years now. I don't know, 3 years maybe? Yeah. Something like that. And I always tell people that when you watch The Curse of Oak Island, they're digging holes looking for something. You have been digging into the history and behind the scenes of what happened to tell the story of what happened at Oak Island. And some of it was conjecture, some of it was theory, and now you've got it down. You got it down? I think you got it figured out. And there was a bunch of people involved, and you're here to tell the story. Now, is this your last book on the matter?
Yes.
May we say this around the world? Because my cousins in the Netherlands watch this. I know people in Ukraine are watching you right now. No pressure, but you heard that first. It's the last book he's going to write about Oak Island. And is your wife watching? So she knows that you said the same thing. Okay, so I'll hold you to that.
Well, this is the book right here, Oak Island, A Masonic Conspiracy. And the reason why I'm this time a little bit more serious about it being the last book is I have a theory that's based on history. And I've attacked this from so many different points of view that A, I'm running out of points of view, but B, it does get tiring in the end, you know. And there's, if 10 books, this is my count, if 10 books aren't convincing enough, there's nothing else I can do there.
What are you trying to convince? What
Well,
in a nutshell, what are you trying to, who and what?
The Oak Island team, basically.
All right.
And they're receptive to it. I've been on the show. There's been snippets of me on 13 different shows. I've been in 6 war room meetings.
Wow.
And I think 3 Zoom meetings. And I get, you know, little ounce of encouragement every year. Like generally in January, Rick Lagina, who's one of the main people running the search, will contact me either by email or a phone call and say, keep sending the emails, keep researching the history. You know, it's all being read. But and I have to say that at the beginning of this season, they have that like a spin-off Maddie Blake show, drilling down.
Drilling down, yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. And that was the first show of the season, and they went through the top 10 theories, and mine was the second.
My theory did not make the top 100.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, and that's a good point. Is that's the top 10, but they have dozens and dozens of theories.
It must be overwhelming for them.
Rick told me one time that they get theories where they'll actually have they'll vet them enough to get the guy in the war room, and then they just look at each other. They don't know what to ask. He doesn't bring enough information to prove his theory, and they don't know what to ask, so they just look at each other. So he said, at least when you come in, you bring all the receipts with you. But
number 10, there was top 10, and where were you in the top 10?
Second.
Number 2.
Yeah. Should have been first, but
I agree.
They made a mistake there, but should have been the first. But so in all the other books, there was mention of the Freemasons as the primary source behind the buried treasure, whatever was buried there or is buried there. But I never wrote a book just from that angle.
All right, well, let me jump in. So you're talking in the 1600s, in the mainstream of Freemasonry, and that's like in your Masonic lodges, and and it's no secret, I'm a Mason. We're told that Freemasonry started in 1717, I believe it was in England. So people would say, well, Jim, this can't be right. You're almost 100 years off. So how did you square that up?
Well, actually, by the time I wrote my third book, and this was the reason I wrote it, a Freemason who was the Grand Historian of the Grand Lodges of Freemasonry in Nova Scotia had emailed me to look into these 2 older books. And as I was looking for them, I actually found another book, The History of the Edinburgh Lodge #1, and it had the whole story. It had the actual facsimiles of the initiations of the first, at least they're the first known non-operative stonemasons. They came in as a gentleman mason or an accepted mason, but not a stonemason.
All right, so let's clarify that for a minute for people that are listening. So a lodge was sort of like a union hall.
Yes.
Today?
Yes.
Is that fair enough to say? And these stonemasons were the ones that built the cathedrals and mansions for people. It was a craft, right?
Right.
And what you're telling me is that it was in Edinburgh, I guess, not borough, Edinburgh, that's where they had the first non-stonemasons, but
Yes.
they were called non-operative. They weren't masons.
Right.
They were Freemasons now.
And they had different names for them. One of them was gentleman masons. They didn't really know what to call them in the beginning because it was a a new phenomenon, and it was driven by the fact that the second one initiated was the Master of Public Works, and there was some objections to him not actually having any building skills per se. How could he lead a bunch of builders? So part of it was political, but it turned out that it swung the whole nature of a Masonic lodge from, and it didn't happen immediately. You know, this took time, and there were arguments, and there were petitions to the king, things like that. But
now this is taking place in Scotland, right?
Yes, in Edinburgh. Edinburgh's the right. Well, it's Edinburgh.
Yeah, right.
You know, you have to say it the Scottish way, Edinburgh. But
so they petitioned the king, and
but eventually they took control of the Masonic lodges as Freemason lodges. And what this book, what the conspiracy part of this book is that you and I, because Doc helped me a lot with this, we started realizing that there were certain people that had their fingers in so many pies. They were close to the kings, King James and his son, King Charles, but they had their fingers in so many other pies, like the Plymouth colony, the beginning of the Freemasons, the beginning of Nova Scotia, and their names just kept popping up. So we realized that these were, you know, the word conspiracy here doesn't have to be something evil. They were working together for a cause. The original cause seemed to be to plant colonies in the New World to get away from all the troubles. The Old World was depleted of resources. There were a lot of fights between royalty. There were a lot of clan wars. There was plagues, religious wars. You know, so they were looking at the New World as a utopia. They actually used that word, utopia. And it was very tough going in the beginning.
What's our time frame?
The early 1600s.
Okay.
And a lot, you know, you hear about the missing Roanoke colony. Well, there were other colonies that were missing too, you know, along in the Maine area. And others just gave up and went back home. And the original settlers of Nova Scotia, that was somewhat the case. They were there from, they received it in 1621. They actually took their first group of actual settlers in 1628.
Now, who's they?
Well, this would be the Scots under a new knighthood called the Knights Baronet of Nova Scotia. And William Alexander was the man who was given Nova Scotia. He was finding it very hard to get people to go and very hard to raise money. So he and King James came up with this idea that if they would create a new knighthood, these knights could put forth money because they would also want to expand their realms. They would receive.
So instead
like
of having baked sales, they sold knighthoods.
Knighthoods. And it did upset a lot of other knighthoods because they had to earn it. You earned it not only in, say, battle or whatever, but you earned it by your skill level, jousting, all different kinds of
war,
ways.
Yeah.
Well, these people literally just got their wallets out.
It'd be like you and me, right? Say,
Yeah, we could say, well,
hey,
I have enough money. I'll
here
be
we
a
go.
knight.
Now you're Sir James.
But they had to commit also 6 skilled people to go, because the idea was they wanted to build communities all the way around the outside of Nova Scotia, and they needed people to do that. They needed builders, but they also needed people to populate it. So the idea was you pay the fee, can be called sir, but you have to provide 6 men. And so they were going to do 100 of them, so that would give them 600 men as a base there. So they were ousted in 1632. Not, you know, it's often written that they failed, but they didn't fail. The king failed them because he gave Nova Scotia back to the French in 1632 in the early spring. And so the French came and they said, pack up your stuff, you have 3 weeks to leave. Well, they couldn't leave at that time of year, and I believe they went around, they were on the backside, the leeward side of Nova Scotia, went around, faced Atlantic storms, pulled into Mahone Bay, which is the deepest into the landmass, and Oak Island is the last island back, so you could pull in behind there and wait out a storm. So that's how I think that they got there. But and that's been written about in all of my books. But what sets this one apart is that we actually identified 12 men, and we could have went further, and we could have not included a couple of them, but these seem to be the most prominent men. And I have to tell, especially the local people, how this came about or how we chose these people. We actually used the back room of Meter's Restaurant, and where they have these big room dividers, and we pinned up all this evidence, all this data. We spent one day doing that, and then we spent the next day analyzing it and transferring it to an Excel file. And a lot of revelations were made during that 2-day period that, oh my gosh, this guy was a brother-in-law to this man. And we found out that all of them, all 12 of them, were on the Privy Council of either Mary Queen of Scots, her son James I, or her grandson Charles I. They were all in those courts. And I had mentioned the Freemasons in my other books, but I decided that I had to have one book that just talked about the Freemasons. Now, I have to go off subject a little bit with the book just to give a background to how it all developed, because nothing starts from nowhere. Everything's connected, nothing happens in a vacuum. But I tried not to go too far back. I only went to where I had to go. And so one of those places that I had to go was the fact that I've determined now and solved a long-held mystery of when the era of the Knights Templar turned into the era of the Freemasons. And I have specific dates. And it was always a legend that they were somehow connected. But I now have the evidence that they're connected, so it's not a legend anymore. If people read my book, they'll find out why. But a few books ago, I sort of accidentally connected a cipher that Mary Queen of Scots had developed when she was in prison.
Now, what's a cipher?
Well, they're symbols that can either mean a letter or a word.
Okay, like a code.
Like a code.
Okay.
And in her case, the vast majority of them were entire words. And in the money pit on Oak Island, at the very bottom of it at 90 foot, they found a stone face down with these ciphers on it. Well, the first thing that they tried to do was decipher it, a symbol for a letter.
Right.
And they assumed it was how to dig up the money pit, but it was at the bottom of the money pit, so you would never do that. So here's the actual code right here. And you'll see I've added the 1, 2, and 3 on it there because they're all near an underlined symbol. I underlined that myself, but they're a 3-dot triangle. Well, the 3-dot triangle is a symbol for Master Mason, and it still is today, and you can find it online thousands of times. So if nothing else, if none of the rest of my code was correct, at least it has to be accepted that the code for Master Mason appears on this stone 3 times. And what is the reason for that? So actually there's another slide there that it actually, yes, okay. Can you bring that down a little bit?
Shrink it.
Fit the screen.
Okay. Well, why don't you go ahead and speak to it?
Okay. Well,
he's gonna try. Yeah.
Okay. One of the symbols on that preceded the Master Mason symbol is what's called the Cross of Lorraine, and the Cross of Lorraine was a cross used by the Templars, and it was also on Mary's ciphers. I found Mary's ciphers. It took me 3 months to find them. They were in a back room at the National Archives of the United Kingdom. And there were 400 letters. And I said, well, how many of them have codes? And they said, we have no idea. I said, well, can you count them out and then could you scan them and send them to me? And they said, well, you'll have to pay. I said, well, that's okay. So I actually ended up with the only digitized version of the
There we go.
code. So
All right, so for people who are listening on the radio right now, we're looking at a screen, and there's, would you say, 3 versions of a double arm cross?
double arm
A
cross.
line
yes.
going down and 2 going through it.
So the first one is the standard cross of Lorraine that you'll see in books about the Templars and other areas too. And it traces back to the Lorraine family, who Mary Queen of Scots was her ancestors. The second one is her actual handwriting from the 1600 or 1500s. That's her actual handwriting of that same symbol. And the third one is on the stone. And in her code, she had the words, the Lord Great Treasurer. Well, it was, she spelt great different, she spelt treasure different, but
Well, yeah,
words were
that was
spelt
the
that way
old
back
English
then.
or Scottish then, yeah.
And when I first saw that, I didn't understand what the low meant, and I thought she literally meant the great treasure, but she meant the Lord Great Treasure. So we happened to find in our group of Masonic conspirators 2 Lord Great Treasures that it could have been. One was the Scottish High Treasure, they called them, and the other one was the English one, and they both had reasons to believe it could be them. But if you notice that right after the symbol for Lord High Treasurer is the Master Mason symbol, and then that C is on many of her cipher sheets means Scotland, a squared off
All
C.
right, so if I may, so what you're saying is that this symbol was on the 90-foot stone.
Yes,
You translated it as the Lord Great Treasure, and this was the title of an office that was held by somebody in Scotland.
yes, one in Scotland and one in England, both of who are members of our Masonic conspiracy. But the one in Scotland seems to be the person for a couple of reasons, but mainly because it has the word Scotland right after Master Mason. So that bit of code right there essentially reads the Lord High Treasurer, Master Mason of Scotland. Taking that verbatim, not making anything up, just taking it verbatim. That's what it reads.
Yeah.
And we've determined that it was William Douglas of Morton was the Lord High Treasurer at that time. Now, the other name that was on there, it was the plus sign for the Earl of Arundel, who was named Thomas Howard. And his son was Henry Howard, and his was like the Roman numeral 2. So if you look at that bit of code, the cross meant support on her code sheet. The plus sign was Lord Earl of Arundel. The circle with a slash to it was intelligence or God, intelligence with a capital I. Then you have the Master Mason symbol. You have the colon, which was and you have the Roman numeral 2. So that literally reads, if you just use her code without making anything up, it reads, support the Earl of Arundel God, Master Mason, and his son, or Lord Henry Howard.
If I can interject something too, one of the things that you mentioned earlier, that there was, people have always said there was a connection to the Knights Templars, who were all killed off like a couple hundred years before the Freemasons were ever founded. We found connections to all of them to Templars, right?
Yes. And not only that, but I found documents that show that Mary Queen of Scots not only returned the right of Masonic lodges, stonemason lodges, to carry out secret meetings and have a deacon oversee their work and their lodge meetings, because that had been outlawed the year before by the Scottish Parliament. They were concerned about a Masonic conspiracy. Well, what happened over the 9-month period was that work projects started to suffer, and that could have been from 2 reasons. It could have been like a blue flu situation, where they just said, well, if we can't do it our way, we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
But it also probably was because they were used to working a certain way. They had a manager of the project who was a deacon, and the stonemasons would follow specific procedures, and they would make their plans behind the scenes, at their lodge meetings, say, okay, when we get to this part of the wall, we have to, put in this kind of an arch or whatever. And that kind of all went out the window with that rule that they couldn't meet in secret anymore and they couldn't have a deacon. So she saw really quickly that there was not going to be any more magnificent structures in Scotland anymore unless she returned the right. So they had outlawed it in 1555. She returned that power in 1556. Had she not done that, now it had already been outlawed in England. So Scotland was the holdout for where the stonemasons were allowed to still meet secretly and have a leader, a deacon leader. She returned that, and it's obvious that had she not returned that power to them, there couldn't have ever been a Freemason lodge, because by returning that, she allowed the stonemason lodges to become stronger. And so the actual document that she signed was just refound in 2019 in Edinburgh, and they knew about the law, but they didn't know where the paperwork was. But they found it in 2019, and they can read it all right now, and it says how she returned it. So 7 years later, which was 1563, there was a gentleman in Scotland who was the final preceptor or leader of the Knights of Malta and the Knights Templar. And he controlled all the final lands in Scotland that belonged to those two units. Now, the Templars had been dissolved everywhere else, and they were essentially dissolved there too, except that they had so many properties. At one point, they had 640 properties. So he was the overseer of all that. So he made a deal with Mary where he would turn all of that over, and he would also turn over a fee of 10,000. They called them crowns of the sun, and they were a crown coin in Scotland. And then he would receive back a title for one of those pieces of property called Torpichin. So he became Lord Torpichin. And he also retained a few of the properties. They were given back to him officially, but as land deeds, not as something, from the Templars, but as land deeds from Mary. And what was interesting was his grandnephew became a Knights Baronet of Nova Scotia, and three of the men he was to pay the money to, rather than pay it to Mary, he was to pay it to 5 men. Well, three of the men had descendants who became Knights Baronet of Nova Scotia not much after this. So just in those 4 cases, we know of 4 men who were involved with the final transaction of Templarism in Scotland, whose descendants, immediate descendants, became Knights Baronet of Nova Scotia. But there's plenty of other ones too, but those are pretty amazing.
All right, so if people are interested to know more of what's in your book, you connected the Templars with the stonemasons, with the Knights Baronet, who founded Nova Scotia, and then just as they're kicked out a little bit later, the Freemasons are formed.
Exactly.
That's in this book. All that's in there.
They left in 1632, they had to, and they formed the Freemasons, per se, in 1634, 2 years later.
Okay. I have a question that just came in. Would you like to take a question?
Sure.
Were the symbols that you were talking about used as signatures for each of the people? In other words, would they sign their name, or was this her code for them?
It was her code.
Okay, good question, though.
What she would, yes, it is. And what she would do, there's 104 cipher sheets. Now, some of them have very few ciphers on them. Some of them are in French. Some of them she uses numbers, which there aren't any numbers on the stone unless you count that Roman numeral 2. But she used actual Arabic numbers. So I used the ones that I sourced were the ones that used common English names and words with the symbols, and I just went through them. not knowing what my final phrases were going to be, I didn't even know who Thomas Howard was at the time. I didn't even know that there was a position as Lord High Treasurer. I was just saying, okay, this symbol means this symbol means this. Then when I got it all out, it made a sense.
So I'd like to share something that you threw at me one day, and it was something she had written, and there was a symbol, and you said, see what you can figure out. Well, it turned out it was in French, right?
Yes.
And it was the sign of the lion, which is her sign. But we had to go and look at all the cipher. We had to look at the wording and then figure out what in the world they were, and then what does that mean? So, I mean, this was a very complicated time for people to live in, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I got a kick out of it. They found some letters that she had written her brother-in-law, who was the King of France, and they found these, and so they used her ciphers on that, and it took an algorithm, and I think they had 57 cipher sheets.
Wow.
And an algorithm and a team of like 4 people. And I only had me with no algorithm and 104 sheets. So I mean, it was painstaking. It took me 3 months to find it and probably 2 months to sort it out. If there's a slide with some trees on it, if you can put that up. In addition to the 90-foot stone, one of the big things about Oak Island are these trees. Now, they don't exist anymore, but they were always called oak trees, and they were planted out on this little sand spit, basically, that where the tide would form this, pull the ground around and make a little spit right there. They call it Isaac's Point. And so that's why they called it Oak Island, because they thought they were oaks, and they were extraordinary oaks compared to red oaks or anything else on any of the other islands. And it's been thought that maybe they were planted to identify the island. Well, a gentleman named David Neeson, he put together a group of botanists and arborists and people that study fungi, and he has like a 10-person team. And they actually found a grove of these trees in Scotland that look identical. So if you look at the tree with the arrow right under it, that's actually from a modern day photo just taken last year of the grove of trees in Scotland. And I pasted it into this old photo. This is an old photo of Oak Island.
So originally there was only 3 clumps?
Well, there is a photo with a tree in that position, but it got cut down.
Oh, okay.
So there were
So you replanted it?
Yeah, I replanted it. And so, for somebody just looking at that photo without knowing the history of it, you could tell them those were the trees.
They are
on Oak
identical.
Island.
They are exactly the same.
Well, the thing about it was one of the botanists that he's working with, he actually lives right near where these are planted in Scotland, and he found that they believe they're European sycamore, not oak, and he said that was brought to Scotland from France with the Mary Queen of Scots entourage.
Because France and Scotland were
Yes,
working
and she
together.
was the
She
queen
was
of-
queen of both at the
She
time.
was Queen of Scotland. In fact, I have a slide on her if you want to put that up. So when I heard that, I thought, oh my gosh, that fits right into my story.
Yeah,
So
there she is.
there she is. She was Queen of Scotland shortly after birth because her dad died just a few days after she was born in 1542. And then she was, because there was a lot of, the Protestant Reformation was starting to begin there and her life was in danger, they took her to France and she ended up marrying the French king at the age of 17. He died at only a couple of years later, and she went back to Scotland as queen. But she was also considered the more rightful heir to the throne of England because Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth I, she was actually an illegitimate child. And Mary descended from Henry VIII's father directly, whereas Elizabeth descended from Henry VIII, but through a mistress rather than a wife, and he had 8 wives as it is.
Imagine that.
Everybody knows that. So Elizabeth, had the power and the press, but if you just looked at the genealogical chart, Mary had the right to the throne.
Okay.
So a lot of people called her Queen of Scotland, France, and England. Well, how many people have ever been called that in their lives? Nobody, so she was an extremely powerful person. And she, as I stated in 1555, she renewed the rights of Masons to meet in secret. In 1563, she accepted the final Knights Templar possessions. So that means that the era, that little space of letting between those two lines, received and accepted, that's when the transition, when the whole transition of history, of this type of history, went from Templar to Freemason.
Okay, catch your breath. So what I understand you to say is then years later, these guys in Scotland used her code on the stone.
Yes, and the reason why I believe, not only for the fact that it matches, all the symbols match, but the gentleman whose name is on the stone, his grandfather was executed because he was found with her code hidden under his floor tile.
And I think he was sweet on her too.
Yeah, he wanted to marry her.
All right.
And so that equally connected the whole thing. And I didn't know any of this when I was translating the code. That's the funny part about it. If I knew all this history and then I said, okay, let's make that code work to fit this, it'd be one thing. But I made the code, I just translated the code, and then I'm like, well, who the heck was Thomas Howard?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, his grandfather was
Sweet on the queen.
executed because he wanted to marry Queen of Scots, and he kept her code.
All right, let's hold that mystery a bit. We have it's either a little dog with an owner or an owner with a dog that's in my ear. So good morning, caller.
It's a little dog with an owner. Good morning.
I heard his woof.
Good morning. How are you, Dad? Good
I'm
morning.
good. Hey,
John, how are you?
how cool is this storyline, huh?
Oh, this is a fascinating time in history.
Yes, it is.
And all during that time, King Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth and Mary, Queen of Scots, and they had to speak in code because there was so much persecution going on.
Absolutely.
Right. You're
And
absolutely.
religious persecution.
Oh, yeah.
And there were all kinds of spies, William Cecil, just a fascinating time in history.
Right.
I wouldn't want to have lived at that time because I probably would have been beheaded.
These guys did not live long.
No, they did not. And, I've seen on the History Channel Curse of Oak Island, too. Have you?
That's where we're talking here. Jim's been out here 13 times.
I know you're talking about that, but the curse and all of it connected, it's fascinating. Now,
the curse itself. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Mm-hmm.
It's a fascinating story, just fascinating. So I'm going to be anxious to get your book. I am anxious to get it.
Good. Well, it's I always tell people, like they say, well, you've written 10 books. Which one should I start with? And you kind of think, well, I'd say start with the first one, and because I've learned things chronologically. But I always feel that my last book's my best book, so I always say start with the last book.
I agree.
Start with the last book, then go backwards with each book, and you'll see how the story developed. But this one again, I wanted to focus mostly on the Freemasons. But you're absolutely right about the persecutions. And if you take the kings and Mary Queen of Scots, leaving out Queen Elizabeth, their average age of their life was 28 years. Mm-hmm. Now, if you knew that you were going to, like, oh boy, I'm going to be king, but I'm only going to live till I'm 28,
Good news.
they don't plan on dying, but they get beheaded, they get
Blown up.
killed and blown up, strangled, one of them, so. And it wasn't just royalty, because it went all the way down the line. Ministers, if they didn't toe the line, they'd have their ears cut off. People would have their hands cut off. I mean, and so I'm like you. I could never have lived there and survived, but I love to read about it. The intrigue and how this person was a spy and connected with this person, and those two people are also connected through some organization. Whatever. So it's quite the web. It always becomes that with Oak Island. And thanks to Doc for helping me straighten this out with some storyboarding. I mean, we were just both getting overwhelmed. Like, we have so much data here.
I have an Excel spreadsheet that has it's as big as this table, I think, that we were looking at as far as Templars, nice baronets, and then taking their descendants that were Masons 100 years later. The names just continued for like 300 years.
And ownership on Oak Island.
Yeah, they all connected.
Searchers and owners on Oak Island.
We'd be sending back emails. I told Jim the other day, I think I found 630 emails that I had that were connected to him in the last couple of years.
Yeah. So it's quite the story.
It is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Now, did I miss, where can I get this book?
It's on Amazon. All of my books are on Amazon.
I see.
Just look for Oak Island, A Masonic Conspiracy, James McQuiston, author. And when you see this one, it's likely, if you type all that in, it's likely that all my other books will come up. You can order all 10 of them if you want, or, but in each one I attacked it from a different point of view. Geographically, the people that were involved with the Plymouth colony. But a lot of people don't know, but Sir Francis Bacon, you hear about him all the time. He was one of the people that petitioned for the Plymouth colony, and William Alexander that owned Nova Scotia was on the council of the Plymouth colony. I mean, the connections are absolutely amazing, and we chose the 12 people that had their fingers in the most pies. And it's fascinating how they knew each other. Most of them knew Shakespeare. A lot of them knew Shakespeare. Some of them acted in his plays.
And they were intermarried.
Yeah, a lot of intermarriage, a lot of delving into the occult as far as like divining rods or philosopher's stones, the Rosicrucians. And it was a time, because there was this whole new world out there, and because James became the king of Scotland, Ireland, and England, so that cut down a little bit of the fighting between the countries, they could focus on other things. And so they're focusing on a new world. They were focusing on understanding history and understanding all these esoteric things.
Hey, Lynn, I'm going to have to ask you we're going to cut you off.
Have a great weekend.
Jim's got 2 minutes left to wrap up his theory here, so
okay,
thanks for calling, but good discussion. Okay.
Thank you.
So, Jim, what else you want to cover in the last couple of minutes? Wow.
I have some slides, but they're probably too complicated to go through now, but they show the actual quotes. We could skip through them.
All right, we'll pop them up and you can just...
So this was the quote about the tradesmen guilds and their deacons were outlawed, and that was in '55, and that's the quote right there. Mm-hmm. The second one is, this is when Mary switched that back around and gave them the power to have their secret lodges again, and that's what led to the Freemasons. This is when, this was the Act of Parliament, but they were concerned with making bonds and leagues amongst themselves, which is sounds like a Masonic conspiracy.
Okay, I'm going to take author's freedom here right now, and I'm going to ask you a question to wrap us up. So the treasure that they're always talking about, what's the treasure that you think is there?
Well, I think at least part of it, the third Freemason ever robbed the richest man in Scotland at the time of all of his treasure, which was massive, and his 30-year younger wife. And almost immediately, he becomes a partner with William Alexander in Nova Scotia. All the earliest Knights Baronet had something to do with that robbery. And it's very obvious that the fix was in. And these were high-level people, but it's very obvious that the fix was in. This gentleman was not well liked by his own children and his wife. And I think they just said, he's got a lot of money, we need a lot of money. Okay. Let's do something about it.
Folks, you've been watching Chautauqua Sunrise. My guest and friend has been Jim McQuiston, who is an author, a theorist, a writer, a researcher on Oak Island and Nova Scotia, the Freemasons and the Templars. His book's on Amazon, but I ask you to look at it if you're interested, because it's great history and will explain a lot of what went on Oak Island and Nova Scotia. Thanks, Jim.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Okay, we're going to do this again next week. See you all 9 o'clock Saturday morning. And again, you can watch this at 2 and 8 every single day this week. Bye now.